Most financial discussions about retirement are organized around the accumulation phase, the years of saving, investing, and building, as though the decisions that matter most are the ones about which products to buy and which markets to be in. I spent the first decade of my career thinking this way, and it took me another decade to understand why the people whose financial outcomes I found most puzzling, the ones with solid careers and reasonable incomes, who arrived at retirement without the security their history should have produced, were not being failed by their investment choices. They were being failed by a decision that had nothing to do with investments and that they had not recognized as the financially determinative decision it actually was. My name is William Grant. The revelation I want to build today is about that decision, the one that precedes every other financial choice and determines the space in which all the other choices operate. The decision is about the relationship between peak income and lifestyle expenditure. Specifically, when income reaches its highest level during the final decade or so of a career, does the lifestyle expand to absorb it, or does the surplus between peak income and a deliberately constrained lifestyle get captured and converted into financial structure? This sounds like a description of a savings rate, and it is related to a savings rate, but it is more fundamental than that. A savings rate is a number. What I am describing is an orientation, a stance toward the relationship between what you earn and what you spend that determines, more than any other single factor, whether peak income builds a financial future or simply funds a more expensive present. The distinction between these two outcomes is not marginal over a 10 or 15-year horizon. It is the difference between financial independence and financial dependence at retirement. And I have watched it play out with the consistency of a law rather than a tendency across hundreds of client situations over 4 decades. The mechanism that makes this the most determinative decision is what I want to describe precisely, because understanding the mechanism is what makes it possible to interrupt it rather than simply experience it. When income rises gradually through career progression, 2 things happen simultaneously. The first is visible, income increases. The second is invisible. The reference frame for what constitutes a normal, appropriate, and sufficient standard of living recalibrates upward in response. The recalibration is not a single decision. It is the accumulated effect of hundreds of small adjustments. The neighborhood that becomes appropriate for someone at a certain professional level. The vehicle that reflects where you are in your career. The vacation standard that has slowly risen to match the social context of colleagues at comparable incomes. The home that felt spacious and then adequate and then slightly constricting and then genuinely insufficient across a decade of income growth. None of these adjustments is individually dramatic. Together, they constitute a lifestyle that, by the time income reaches its peak, consumes most or all of what peak income produces. The financial consequence of this dynamic is specific and computable. I want to give you the framework of the computation because seeing it in this form is what makes the decision concrete rather than abstract. Someone at peak income has 2 choices about what to do with the surplus between their income and a lower, constrained lifestyle. They can spend the surplus on lifestyle, on the expansion, upgrade, and elevation of the standard that the income permits. Or they can capture it, systematically save and invest it into financial structures that generate income independent of labor. The first choice produces a better present life with the same financial position at retirement. The second choice produces a comparable present life with a meaningfully different financial position at retirement, specifically a position that generates the income the lifestyle requires without the continued labor income that currently funds it. The difference in the retirement financial position between these two choices, maintained for 15 years at reasonable rates of return, is not a small difference in degree. It is a structural difference in kind, the difference between a financial life that supports itself and one that requires continued earning to survive. I want to ground this in a specific story, because abstraction rarely produces the clarity that specificity does. A woman named Margot came to see me at 58, a senior partner in a consulting firm with 15 years of partnership-level income behind her and 8 to 10 years of continued high earning ahead. From outside, Margot's life looked exactly as successful as her career suggested it should. A house that reflected her professional standing, cars, travel, memberships, the social spending appropriate to her circles, the home renovation projects that kept pace with her neighborhood's evolving standards. She came to me not because anything was visibly wrong, but because she had done a rough calculation about her projected retirement position, and the number troubled her. It was lower than she expected given her income history, and she could not identify the specific failure responsible for the discrepancy. The analysis was not complicated, but its conclusion was uncomfortable. Margot's income had grown by roughly 80% over the prior 15 years. Her total monthly expenditure had grown by approximately the same amount. The surplus between her income growth and the expenditure level she had been at 15 years earlier had been completely absorbed by the lifestyle recalibration. Not by waste, by the steady and visible, individually reasonable expansion of standards that income growth makes possible and social context makes seem appropriate. The practical consequence was that Margot, despite 15 years of exceptional income, had not built the financial structure that those 15 years should have produced. She had built a lifestyle. What was now available to her was a version of the choice she had not taken 15 years earlier. 8 to 10 years of continued high income remained. Each year of that remaining window, if the lifestyle were held deliberately at its current level rather than allowed to continue recalibrating upward, would produce a surplus that could be converted into income-generating assets. We calculated the projected outcome of this path with precision. 8 years of disciplined surplus capture at her income level, invested in a diversified portfolio with a meaningful dividend component, would produce at 66 a monthly income from assets that covered approximately 70% of her current expenses. Combined with her other retirement income sources, the total would be sufficient. The path required holding the lifestyle constant through a period in which income continued to rise, which meant actively choosing not to respond to further income increases with further lifestyle adjustments. This is harder than it sounds. It requires saying no to what the income now permits, in ways that feel like restraint, even though the absolute level of the lifestyle is genuinely comfortable. Margot made that choice, and the 5 years since have been among the most financially productive of her life, not because the investments have been spectacular, but because for the first time in 15 years, a meaningful and consistent surplus has been flowing into financial structure rather than being absorbed by the ratchet. She described the experience at our most recent meeting with a precision that I found characteristic of how she approached all problems. She said that she had spent 15 years expanding her lifestyle proportionally to her income, which produced a better life, and the prior 5 years contracting the expansion to a fixed level while redirecting the surplus, which produced a better future. Both were choices. Only one of them was made deliberately. The revelation at the center of everything I have said is simple in its statement and profound in its implication. Peak income is not primarily an opportunity to live better than before. It is primarily an opportunity to build a structure that will allow you to live at least as well as now without continued high income. The lifestyle expansion that feels like the natural reward for career success is, in financial terms, the primary mechanism through which that opportunity is squandered. Not through irresponsibility, through the completely natural and socially reinforced process of spending what income permits rather than investing what the structure requires. You are either inside this dynamic or you are deliberately outside it. There is no middle ground. If your lifestyle has expanded in proportion to your income growth over the past decade, you are inside it. If you have held the lifestyle constant and captured the surplus, you are outside it. Knowing which one describes your situation precisely with the actual numbers rather than the approximation is the prerequisite for the decision. So here is what I want you to do today before the clarity of this conversation fades. Open your bank statements and credit card statements from exactly 10 years ago. Add up your total monthly spending. Compare it to your total monthly spending today. If the growth in your spending matches or exceeds the growth in your income, you are inside the mechanism. Now you have the choice to make.